Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk Justice League. But before we talk Justice League, I must read scripture. And I want to say one thing before I get into the scripture. That one of the beautiful things about scripture, which I find a parallel with Zack Snyder films, is plurality in meaning. That one saying can mean multiple things. Bearing that in mind, I'm about to read the scripture for you today. It comes from Psalms 36, 11 and 12, and then 37, 1 to 3. 5 verses. And it goes like this. Let not the foot of pride come against me. Let not the hand of the wicked remove me. There are the workers of iniquity fallen. They are cast down and shall not be able to rise. Do not fret yourself because of evildoers, neither be envious against the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass, and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord, and do good. So shall you dwell in the land, and truly you shall be fed. Like I said, scripture always has multiple meanings. And this scripture is no different. Now, the most obvious meaning is that people who are actually working out of pride, and they are people who are doing things which do not help mankind, they will fall. They shall not stay forever. Not only that, but you shouldn't be envious of people like that. But it also has an internal meaning, which is the tendencies within us to make us proud. The tendencies within us to make us a harm to others. Those things will fall if we hold fast to the Lord, which is what verse 3 is saying. Trust in the Lord and do good, and you shall dwell in the land. Now you can think of it as a literal land, but we are talking about a peace of mind. A state of mind is also land. And you shall be fed, meaning you shall be fed love and peace and other virtues. So, like scripture, as I said before, Zack Snyder has what is called plurality. He will say something, but it means multiple things. In this case, it's not really Zack Snyder saying what is about to be said, but nonetheless, he puts it in his film. And that's how you know you have a Zack Snyder film. A Zack Snyder film is not superficial. So let's get to it. Aquaman, which you're seeing in front of you here. Wonderful poster of him. I just thought I'd just blow him up a little bit. Now, some people accuse me of hero worship. I do not worship heroes. Alright? Do like how this character looks, but I ain't worshiping him. Okay? But what I do love is the qualities, the characteristics, the depth behind a character. Alright? This is supposed to embody something. Aquaman embodies something. So let's get to it. So, Aquaman, when Batman went recruiting him, I say Batman, not Bruce Wayne necessarily. Batman went recruiting him. He met him. And he was met with hostility at first. And then Aquaman sat down and started talking with him. And while they were walking and talking, Aquaman comes to the scene where he's entering back into the ocean to disappear. And Aquaman says a saying to Batman. He says, ever heard the saying, the strongest man is strong alone? Or the strongest man is strongest alone? And Batman looked at him. Because Batman actually encapsulated and embodied that saying until Superman died, and Batman knew he needed to bond with other people. In fact, Batman so believed that saying that he was out to kill Superman so that Superman would not be this threat. The reason he threw down against Superman was because he wanted to show he's the strongest man, and he's the strongest man alone. And so, a strong man is the strongest man alone is the saying that Aquaman said. Now, interestingly enough, that saying is an actual saying. It's actually said by some reputable people. The strong man is strongest when alone is a quotation directly out of Friedrich Schiller. And Friedrich Schiller was a German poet, philosopher, physician, historian, and playwright. This guy was a polymath. Okay, he did multiple things. And so that saying is not to be taken lightly when Aquaman says to Batman, ever heard the saying, the strongest man is strongest alone? That's actually a saying that a well-renowned poet, physician, historian, and playwright, a German poet, he said. And he wasn't the only one to say it. Henrik Ibsen also said this saying in a slightly different way. The strongest man in the world is he who stands most alone. And this guy, Henrik Ibsen, was a major 19th century Norwegian playwright, theater director, and poet. And he's referred to as the father of realism. He's one of the founders of the modernism in theater. So this guy ain't no joke, okay? These are highly influential people. So when Aquaman was saying to Batman, ever heard the saying, the strongest man is strongest alone? And then Batman said, that's not a saying. That's the opposite of the saying. Batman was pretty much talking about this saying here. Let me see if I can find it. I'll find it. Here it is. We are stronger together than we are alone, said by Walter Payton, who was another renowned person in the world. Now, let's go into detail about the strongest man is strongest alone, because, or the strongest man in the world is he who stands most alone, or the strongest man is strongest when alone. Let's go into some detail of that. And so there was actually an article done by a certain person who was referring to Henrik Ibsen, and he said that this quote means that the strongest man is the most independent. Individuals who do not need to rely on others to survive. Individuals who stand alone are the ones who realize the strength within themselves and become powerful characters. This quote is valid because individuals who like to take action on their own and at their own pace become the most successful. Two works of literature that support the validity of this statement are Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger and The Color of Water by James McBride. So this is really talking about individualism. Someone preserving their individualism and also being able to reflect in their quiet time is actually stronger for it and more of what they are, their ideals, their vision. And these people lived by that. Henrik Ibsen and also Friedrich Schiller. They both lived by this principle. So the principle has validity in it. And now you have to understand Aquaman's side of the equation. Aquaman was the strongest guy. He was half Atlantean, half Earthling, but he did not see himself belonging to Earth or to the Atlantean world. And so he was kind of an outsider in between, and he was on the fringes of both. He's on the fringes of civilization and mankind, and he's on the fringes of Atlantis. But most importantly, he's saying his story is that since he's so misunderstood, he's alone, and he's strongest when he's alone. He's strong and he's strongest when he's alone. He's his own individual. He does not want to listen to the Atlanteans and do their way. And he doesn't want to listen to mankind and do their way, because as far as he's concerned, mankind is going down the precipice. And Atlantis, they have a way that he doesn't fully agree with, and he doesn't think that he should be indoctrinated in their way, as you hear him talk to Bruce Wayne about that. And then he goes on that huge spiel with the lasso of truth thing, in which he talks about not belonging to either world. Now, there's another meaning. As I said before, meanings, these sayings have plural meanings. So the first one is individualism. The second one that I want to discuss is literally taking the saying at its merit. The strongest man is strongest alone. Only the strongest man is strongest, in other words. And that saying is an absolute saying which was actually encapsulated by Steppenwolf. By the way, just to go back to the former saying, Batman worked as an best alone. He worked as an individual as well. He had his own mindset. He did things his own way. He interfaced with Commissioner Gordon, but basically he did things alone. So that idea by Schindler and also by Ibsen is actually what Batman takes to heart, which is why Batman functions a certain way. He doesn't do the law the same way. He doesn't try to go into the confines of the law. He does it his own way to be the most effective he can be. So once again, Batman embraced that ideology, but in Justice League you see him go against that ideology because he realizes the threat he has to deal with makes it important that he works with others, and only by working with others he can deal with this threat, not alone. So that's why Batman actually engages Aquaman, says, no, that's not the saying. It's the opposite of the saying, even though there is actually a saying like that. Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf believes that truth is an absolute power. That's it. All right? Steppenwolf is a strong man. And he believes he is strongest. Only he is strongest. He's strongest alone, exclusively himself. Okay? And Steppenwolf is a conqueror of worlds. He's called the end of worlds. And he converted these worlds into apocalypse. He's a nationalist. Okay, he's not a globalist. He's a planetarianist. I have to come up with a new word because he basically terraforms planets into the planet of his homeworld, Apocalypse. And he sends his message, his crusade, to convert people in other worlds into parademons, which are of his world. He's hellish, he's from below, and his dogma is power, 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 fear, fear, power. That's his thing. There's nothing more to Steppenwolf you need to know right now, except for that. So the strongest man is strongest alone, and his allegiance is to dark side. You hear him say, can you see it? When he talked to Cyborg about being an agent of chaos. Can you see it? You see it now. True power is absolute. And then he goes on to say, you're not strong enough to take the truth. None of you. You know? Now, it's very interesting because Steppenwolf is a strong man. He's a strong man in this movie, right? And Steppenwolf represents strong men in society. And while people say, oh, he's a weak villain. No, he's not a weak villain. In fact, he is a real villain. Let me give you a list of some strong men in the world today. Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un rules by a fist of iron, and he uses his military might. Kim Jong-un rules North Korea as a strong man, and he has assassinated even members of his family and cabinet once they disagreed with him. Strong man is strongest alone. Again, like Steppenwolf, his allegiance is to North Korea, so we have the flag behind him. He's a nationalist. Steppenwolf's a planetarianist, where he will convert everything into his ideology because his ideology alone is strongest. And so he will impose his ideology. Kim Jong-un is the same. He's looking to nuclear blast South Korea. He's looking to blast other nations with his nuclear arsenal, making him dangerous. Let me give you another strong man. This gentleman, you know him as Assad, Syria. Mass genocides he has caused in his own country, killing out people, to rule them with a rod of iron. Assad is a strong man, and he believes the strong man is strongest alone. I'll give you another strong man, Donald Trump. He castigates Congress and the Senate when they don't execute his plan. He tongue lashes and attacks citizens. The strong man is strongest alone. His supporters believe he's very strong because he speaks inflammatory rhetoric and he disrespects other people. But he never accepts responsibility for his actions. The strong man is strongest alone. And what is this guy? What does he push for? Nationalistic values. He's a nationalist. Assad's a nationalist. See the flag behind him? Kim Jong-un's a nationalist. See the flag behind him? Steppenwolf is a planetarianist. See Apocalypse behind him? Get what I'm saying? Strong man is strongest alone. And of course, Vladimir Putin. Circulating via RT, Russian television, all this propaganda to disrespect other institutions except for Russian institutions. All of these gentlemen have something in common with them. Their ideologies, they believe, are strongest because of them, their personality. They want to be worshipped, and they will force people to worship them. You can't say anything bad about them, they'll attack you. Donald Trump here, because he's in the United States of America, is still in check and balance. But if he could have things his way, he would have people dead and executed. You become a threat in a small way to Vladimir Putin, and all of a sudden, you're gone. So a number of people have been killed. American diplomats have been outed of that country. People of other religious persuasions have been persecuted and kicked out the country. Donald Trump is right now having a mass exodus, ethnic cleansing of people who are not American. The latest was the Haitian people he's trying to get out of the country. And Mr. Assad has had mass genocide and ethnic cleansing in his country. He's even bombed people who are innocents. Kim Jong-un has killed people from his cabinet and position just like Stalin did. These are strong men, and they believe the strongest man is strongest alone. They are not interested in having friends and colleagues and associates. Now, Batman, as I said before, Bruce Wayne, Batman, he told Aquaman that's not the saying. That's the opposite of what the saying is. And the saying that's opposite and opposing to this is we are stronger together than we are alone. Let me remind you of the sayings that we saw Aquaman expose. He said the strong man is strongest when alone. But the saying that opposes that is we are stronger together than we are alone, by Walter Payton, which is opposing. It's an opposing, seemingly opposing at least, point of view, juxtaposition to the original saying. And it's clever how Zack Snyder was able to put this in with the other saying that Aquaman says, which is the opposite saying. But if you don't do your homework and if you don't do research, you wouldn't realize how clever Zack Snyder was with that moment. So basically there is a debate. Which is better? And the truth be told, both are correct. But we'll get to that in a minute. I love Zack Snyder because he really makes you reflect on what he's saying. Now, there is one more aspect to this saying that we must go into. And that is, the strong man is strongest when alone. And that's Friedrich Schiller, which is a slight variation of what Aquaman said. And of course, Henrik Ibsen said the strongest man in the world is he who stands most alone. Which kind of more goes to what Aquaman is saying in the third meaning. Like I said, these things are plurals. And here's the third meaning. The third meaning is, the strongest man is strong alone. That's what Aquaman said. You are lonely. You're by yourself. And sometimes very much misunderstood. That's the third meaning. The strongest man is strongest, and usually he's strong all alone. He's strong all alone. He's by himself. And before I get into that, this saying here, we are stronger together than we are alone, is what Batman actually embraced because he had to have additional members of the team, including Aquaman, join. And so it was funny to hear Commissioner Gordon say, it's good to see you working well again with others. Because that showed that Batman embraced this now. We are stronger together than we are alone. Because he knew he couldn't do this one alone. He couldn't go up against this opposition alone. And then Batman says, maybe temporary. Which tells you that he's still not ready to let go of the strongest man is strongest alone. Alright? And then we see him communicating with Aquaman saying, you talk to fish, right? He's trying to get as much help as possible. Even though it's a burden on him to lead this team. But I want to go back to that original saying, the strongest man is strongest alone, which has to do with now a person being alone in the world and misunderstood. And people cannot empathize with what they're going through. And what person more this is applicable to than the Man of Steel himself, Superman, growing up as a child, going through puberty and having all these changes to his body. And other children thinking he's weird because he stays home so often with his parents. Doesn't really mix with children that much. And you can see his frustration and his loneliness in this moment here in this photo. This is as a child, growing up, misunderstood. Other children picking on him and having to conserve his strength because of good values that his parents put in him so he doesn't lash back at them and kill them with one shot or one blow. He understands the severity of things. Because of the power he's given, he understands his responsibility. He's the strongest man in the room. And yet he's so alone. And it's interesting as he grows up as an older person, Clark Kent is still trying to find his identity. He helps many people, but he's a loner. He's a journeyer. He's a traveler. He's a gypsy. And I think Henry Cavill can identify with some of that. It's not that he's a bad personality. People like him. He's always doing nice things, but he's still alone in the sense that people don't always understand him. And he doesn't stick around long enough for people to understand him, except for his mother and his father, until Lois Lane. And even in that world with Lois Lane, after the Metropolis disaster, brought on by General Zod, by the way, not his fault, he gets blamed for it. And he's all alone again. In fact, if you look at this here as he goes into the Senate building in BVS, you will see the saying, "This is our world, not yours. Get out of here, you alien. And aliens don't belong." So there's all this xenophobic reaction to him, even though all he has been trying to do is good for mankind and inspire them. Still, there's a substantive portion of them that want him to leave, reflective of our society. The strongest man is strong alone. However, it doesn't last. After he gives his life and he's dead, he comes back. And on his return, for the first time, Batman, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, there's a group of people who can identify with what he has been going through. It's no longer just Lois Lane and Ma Kent and a couple people in the world who are behind him, even though the world is ready to kind of embrace him after he dies. But now, he also has this team, this league, the Justice League. And now, he's no longer alone. And we find out that the saying, "we are stronger together than we are alone," is true. It rings true over and over again in Justice League, which is why the movie is Justice League, which is why it encourages us to come together in spite of our differences, in spite of the fact that we are individuals and we have individual characteristics and qualities. And so at the end of the day, Zack Snyder makes a good point. And Aquaman does have a point to some degree. The strong man is strongest alone. And it's actually a true saying. You are strongest alone in terms of you as a person and developing your personality. But there's a balance between alone time and being an individual and also contributing to society in a collective and as a team. And so what's so fantastic about going into Justice League and hearing Aquaman say that and saying it's a true saying is the fact that we're introduced to individualism and also to teamwork. There's a balance between who you are as a person and what you can give to a group of people. And that's the important thing about this movie. And Aquaman was 100% correct. The strongest man is strongest alone is actually a saying. And it is true. But it is not to be said in a void. And with that strongest man is strongest alone comes the third meaning that I gave, which is loneliness. Therefore, you cannot just be in alone time all your life. You have to be able to interface with other people and share your experiences, which means this saying is important too. And I thought this movie explored those two things. And that's why I appreciate Zack Snyder and his movies for the plurality of meaning. Of course, strongest man is strongest alone could be a deadly meaning. It could be dangerous, as we see with the strong men of the world. And if left unchecked, these strong men, well, we've seen Adolf Hitler and what he was doing. And if it wasn't for the world coming together, they wouldn't have stopped him. And we saw Steppenwolf in this movie and what he could bring to the table. And if the heroes didn't come together, they wouldn't have stopped him. And Batman knows, in this case, he wasn't going to be the strongest man. But Steppenwolf's philosophy of the strongest man is strongest alone didn't work. And the truth be told, Superman is different to Steppenwolf. He was alone. He was the strongest man. But he used his strength to inspire instead of beat people down with his ideology. Superman allowed people to express their different views of him, and he never, like a tyrant, tried to suppress that. And as a result of that, Superman inspired not just humans, but metahumans. And so out of that birthed the Justice League. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope you also understood the themes of nationalism versus globalism. There's nothing wrong with being nationalistic, but you must be able to balance your nationalism with your giving to the global community. There is a balance between nationalism and globalism that we need in the world today. Individualism and teamwork. On that note, you guys have a great one.